taste of coal dust is the first thing I know. It coats the back of my tongue, a mineral dryness that settles overnight even with the windows latched tight. It is the taste of Paris in the 1890s, a city that breathes smoke and exhales soot. I open my eyes. The gray light of dawn is struggling against the heavy velvet curtains, leaking through the gaps in a pale, sickly stripe that illuminates the dust motes dancing in the cold air. The room is freezing. My breath plumes before me, a momentary ghost that vanishes as quickly as it forms. I am buried under 3 layers. The first is the sheet, heavy linen that has absorbed the dampness of the room and clings to my legs with a clammy persistence. The second is a wool blanket, coarse and scratchy, smelling faintly of the lavender sachets my wife tucks into the cedar chest. The third is an old greatcoat I threw over the foot of the bed last night when the temperature began to drop. The mattress beneath me is stuffed with horsehair. It is firm, unforgiving, and has developed a valley in the center where my body rests. I shift, and the wooden frame of the bed groans, a sound of dry timber rubbing against timber. Beside me, the space is empty. My wife, Elodie, is already awake. I can hear the distant, muffled, rhythmic scraping of the iron grate in the kitchen stove being shaken out. I push the covers back. The cold air strikes my skin like a physical blow. I sit up, my feet finding the floorboards. The wood is unvarnished oak, worn smooth by decades of footsteps, and it saps the heat from my soles instantly. I reach for my spectacles on the nightstand, the wire frames cold to the touch, and hook them behind my ears. The room sharpens. The washstand in the corner is a silhouette of white porcelain against the dark floral wallpaper. I stand and walk to the basin. The water in the pitcher has been sitting all night. When I pour it into the bowl, the liquid is perfectly clear and numbingly cold. I do not have the luxury of hot water this early. The stove is not yet hot enough to boil a kettle. I cup my hands and splash the freezing water onto my face. It shocks the sleep out of me, tightening my pores and stinging my eyes. I reach for the soap, a square block of tallow-based soap that smells of nothing but fat and lye. It lathers poorly in the hard water, creating a thin, milky film rather than a rich foam. I scrub my neck, my ears, and the coarse stubble on my chin. Shaving is a ritual of patience. I strop my straight razor on the leather strip hanging from the side of the washstand. The sound is a rhythmic, sliding friction, leather against steel. I mix a small amount of shaving powder in a mug, working the badger hair brush until a stiff lather rises. Applying it to my face, the bristles feel stiff, exfoliating the skin. The razor is carbon steel, kept terrifyingly sharp. I pull the skin of my cheek taut and draw the blade down. The metal scrapes audibly against against the grain of my beard. One slip means blood, and in my line of work, open cuts sting when exposed to high-proof alcohol vapors. I rinse the blade, wipe my face with a rough linen towel that feels like canvas, and inspect my reflection in the small, clouded mirror. The face staring back is pale, the skin around the eyes shadowed, the uniform of every Parisian worker. Dressing is an architectural process. I start with my union suit, a one-piece undergarment of knitted cotton that covers me from ankles to wrists. It has lost its elasticity at the cuffs, hanging slightly loose. Over this, I pull on my socks. They are gray wool, darned at the heels with a slightly different shade of thread, where a Lodi has repaired them. Next come the trousers. They are made of thick, dark moleskin, a heavy cotton fabric that mimics the texture of suede, but wears like iron. They are high-waisted, reaching almost to my ribs. I fasten the buttons at the fly. They are bone buttons, cold and hard. I pull on my shirt. It is white cotton, stiff with starch, but I do not attach the collar yet. The collar is a separate piece, made of celluloid that can be wiped clean, saving on laundry costs. I struggle briefly with the brass collar stud at the back of the neck, forcing it through the stiff buttonhole. Once the shirt is secured, I button my suspenders to the waistband of my trousers. The leather tabs creak as I pull the straps over my shoulders. Finally, the waistcoat. It is a dark charcoal wool, double-breasted. This is not just clothing. It is armor against the chill of the distillery and a sign of my station. I am not a common laborer. I am a distiller, a craftsman. I slip my pocket watch into the left vest pocket. The silver case is cool and smooth. I wind it, the tiny gears clicking with a satisfying resistance, and check the time. It is 5:30 in the morning. I leave the bedroom and walk down the short, narrow hallway to the kitchen. The smell of the house changes here. The stale, sleeping breath smell of the bedroom is replaced by the sharp, sulfurous tang of a match recently struck, and the underlying aroma of coal smoke. The kitchen is small, dominated by the black cast iron stove. A Lodi has the fire going. The iron door of the firebox radiates a dull, rising heat. On the table, breakfast is waiting. It is simple, caloric, and necessary. There is a loaf of bread, a pain de campagne, a round country loaf with a thick, dark crust dusted with flour. It is dense and heavy. Beside it sits a crock of butter and a small pot of coffee. I sit at the small wooden table. The chair is rickety, one leg slightly shorter than the others. I slice the bread. The knife has a wooden handle and a carbon steel blade that has developed a gray patina from years of cutting acidic fruits and onions. The crust of the bread is hard. It resists the knife, cracking loudly before the blade sinks into the soft, aerated crumb inside. I cut a thick slab. I spread the butter thick. It is salted butter from Normandy, a yellow so deep it is almost orange. The coffee is black and fierce. We mix the coffee beans with roasted chicory root to make the supply last longer, and to add a heavy, woody body to the brew. I pour it into a ceramic bowl, not a cup. I hold the bowl with both hands to warm my fingers. The steam rises, smelling of roasted earth and burnt caramel. I dip the buttered bread into the coffee. The hot liquid melts the butter, creating oily swirls on the surface of the black coffee. I eat quickly. The soggy bread is comforting, a warm weight in my stomach. This fuel must last me until the midday meal. I finish the last dregs of the coffee, the chicory leaving a bitter sediment at the bottom of the bowl. I stand, brush the crumbs from my waistcoat, and go to the door. I put on my heavy boots, lacing them tight. They are leather, scuffed at the toes, with hobnailed soles that will grip the wet cobblestones. I don my flat cap and my heavy woolen coat. Stepping out onto the street, the sensory assault of Paris begins. We live on the 3rd floor of a tenement in the 11th arrondissement. The stairwell smells of boiled cabbage and old damp plaster. I descend the spiraling wooden stairs, my boots thudding heavily. Outside, the air is blue and hazy. The gas street lamps are still flickering, though the lamplighter's will be along soon to extinguish them. The street is a canyon of gray stone. The cobblestones are slick with a mixture of morning dew, and the eternal grime of the city, horse manure, coal dust, and mud. The sound of the city is waking up. I hear the rattle of a milk cart's iron wheels on the stones, the clip-clop of a heavy draft horse, and the swish of the street sweeper's brooms made of birch twigs. I walk briskly. The cold nips at my nose and ears. I pass a Morris column, a green cylindrical advertising tower pasted with colorful posters. One advertises a cabaret in Montmartre, featuring a woman with high-kicking legs and red petticoats. Another advertises a brand of soap. They are bright splashes of color in the gray morning. My destination is not far, only 6 streets away. The distillery is a brick building tucked into an alleyway that smells perpetually of anise and fermentation. As I approach, the smell hits me before I even see the door. It is a complex, medicinal, botanical aroma. It smells of wet herbs, high-proof alcohol, and the damp earthiness of the cellar. To some, it smells like medicine. To me, it smells like livelihood. I unlock the heavy wooden door with a large iron key. The lock is stiff and requires a jiggle to turn. I step inside and close the door, shutting out the noise of the street. The silence here is heavy. The air is cooler than outside, insulated by the thick brick walls. I light a gas lamp on the wall. The flame hisses to life, casting a warm, yellow glow over the room. This is my domain. The main floor is dominated by the stills, the alembics. They are beautiful machines, hammered copper pots with graceful swan neck pipes curving up and over into the cooling coils. The copper is dull in the low light, stained with the patina of heat and oxidation. My first task is not with the stills, but with the raw materials. I walk to the storage area in the back. Here, lined up against the wall, are burlap sacks. I open the first one. The smell is pungent and dusty. It is Artemisia absinthium, grand wormwood. I reach my hand in. The dried leaves and flowers are gray-green and brittle. I rub a pinch between my fingers. It releases a scent that is intensely bitter, dry, and herbaceous. This is the soul of the spirit. I move to the next sack. Green anise. The seeds are small, striated, and greenish-brown. The smell is sweet, like licorice, sharp and piercing. It balances the bitterness of the wormwood. The third sack is sweet fennel. The seeds are larger, paler. Their scent is similar to anise, but rounder, more vegetable-like. This is the holy trinity of absinthe: wormwood, anise, fennel. I walk to the large brass balance scale on the workbench. I place a brass weight on one side, 2 kilograms. I take a metal scoop and begin to transfer the wormwood from the sack to the scales pan. The dry leaves rustle like autumn foliage. I must be precise. Too much wormwood, and the drink becomes unpalatably bitter. Too little, and it lacks the characteristic power. I watch the needle on the scale hover, and then settle. I repeat the process with the anise and fennel. I also measure out smaller amounts of hyssop and lemon balm, the secondary herbs that will be used later for the coloring step. But for now, I focus on the maceration batch. I carry the measured herbs to the maceration tank. It is a large steel vat. I lift the heavy lid. Inside, the tank is empty, waiting. I pour the herbs in. They create a mound of gray and green dust at the bottom. Now comes the alcohol. We use a neutral spirit derived from beets. It is 85% alcohol by volume. Strong enough to strip paint. Strong enough to burn the lining of your nose if you inhale too deeply. It is stored in a large wooden tun with a brass spigot. I place a copper bucket under the spigot and turn the handle. The clear liquid rushes out, foaming slightly. The smell is overwhelming, clean, sharp, and chemical. It fills the room, cutting through the herbal scents. I fill the bucket and carry it to the maceration tank, pouring it over the dry herbs. I have to make 10 trips with the bucket to get the required volume. With each pour, the liquid hits the herbs, darkening them instantly. The dry leaves absorb the spirit, beginning the process of surrendering their essential oils. The clear liquid begins to turn a murky, brownish green. I take a long wooden paddle the handle worn smooth by years of grip, and stir the mixture. It is heavy work. The herbs are absorbent and dense. I churn the liquid, ensuring every leaf and seed is soaked. The fumes rise up, making my eyes water. This is the digestive phase. The herbs will sit in this alcohol for 24 hours, steeping like a very strong, very intoxicating tea. But I cannot wait 24 hours for work to begin. I have yesterday's macerate ready for distillation. I move to the copper still, the alembic labeled number 3. I check the valves. I check the water bath, the bain-marie that surrounds the pot. We do not heat the absinthe directly over the fire. The herbs would burn and ruin the flavor. We use a steam jacket or a water bath to heat it gently. I open the valve to the steam pipe connected to the boiler in the basement. The pipes bang and shudder as the heat rises. I can hear the water in the jacket beginning to hiss. I go to a different tank, one where a mixture has been steeping since yesterday morning. It is a dark, sludge-like swamp of alcohol and plant matter. Using a pump, I transfer this liquid into the copper pot of the still. It sloshes in, smelling intensely of wet vegetation and licorice. I seal the top of the still. The heavy copper cap fits snugly. I tighten the screw clamps, using a wrench to ensure there are no leaks. If vapor escapes, it is not only a waste of product, it is a fire hazard. Now I wait for the heat. I walk around the still, touching the copper belly. It is cold, but warming rapidly. I can feel the vibration of the boiling water in the jacket. While the still heats, I prepare the receiving vessel. It is a glass carboy placed at the end of the cooling coil. The coil runs through a tank of cold water. The alcohol vapor will rise up the swan neck, travel down into the coil, cool, condense, and drip into the carboy as clear, potent spirit. I pull a high stool over to the monitoring station. I take a logbook from the shelf. It is bound in black leather, the spine cracked. I dip a steel-nibbed pen into an inkwell and record the date, the time, the batch number, and the specific weights of the herbs I used. My handwriting is cramped and utilitarian. 10 minutes pass. The copper of the still is now too hot to touch. I hear the first sounds of distillation, a gurgling within the pipes. I watch the spout at the end of the cooling coil. A single drop appears. It hangs for a second, clear as a diamond, then falls into the glass carboy. Then another, then a steady trickle. I slide a small tasting glass under the stream, catching a few milliliters of the liquid. I lift it to my nose. This is the heads, the first part of the run. It smells sharp, solvent-like, and aggressive. It contains volatile compounds that are harsh and undesirable. I dump it into a waste bucket. We discard the heads. I wait, watching the flow increase. I take another sample. I smell it. The sharpness is fading, replaced by a blossoming bouquet of anise and fennel. The wormwood is there, a bass note beneath the high treble of the anise. I taste a tiny drop on the tip of my finger. It is hot, numbing, but the flavor is clean. This is the heart, the good spirit. I let the stream flow into the main carboy. The room is now warm, heated by the radiating energy of the still and the steam pipes. The air is thick with the smell of cooking herbs, a scent that clings to my clothes, my hair, and my skin. It is a smell I will carry home with me tonight, a smell that marks me as a maker of the green fairy. I stand up and stretch, my back cracking. The morning sun has finally risen fully outside, but in here, the light is golden and hazy, filtered through glass and vapor. I check the pressure gauge. I adjust the steam valve slightly, lowering the heat to maintain a slow, steady drip. Distillation cannot be rushed. It requires patience, a steady hand, and a respect for the chemistry of nature. My stomach grumbles, digesting the bread and coffee, but my mind is clear. The rhythm of the drops falling into the glass vessel is a metronome for my day. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3. The transformation of weed and root into emerald spirit has begun. I take a rag and wipe a smudge of coal dust from the copper shine of the still. The metal gleams back at me, distorted and warm. The work is underway. The heat inside the distillery at midday does not merely surround you, it inhabits you. It is a living thing, heavy with the weight of steam and the volatile, suffocating spirit of 85% alcohol. The sun, currently high above the slate roofs of the 11th arrondissement, beats down upon the glass skylights of our factory floor. But that natural warmth is nothing compared to the industrial fever radiating from the row of copper alembics. I stand before my charge, the third still in the line, a massive copper beast that holds 1,000 liters of macerating spirit. My shirt, a rough spun cotton that was stiff with starch at dawn, is now plastered to my back, translucent with sweat. The air tastes sweet, cloying, and dangerous. It is the scent of the holy trinity of the trade: grand wormwood, green anise, and sweet fennel. In the morning, these herbs smell like a meadow in the Jura Mountains. By noon, under the pressure of steam, they smell like a heavy, intoxicating syrup that coats the back of the throat and makes the eyelids heavy. My hand grips the brass wheel of the steam valve. It is wrapped in a thick rag, for the metal is hot enough to blister skin in a second. I am listening to the machine. A distillery worker does not look with his eyes as much as he listens with his bones. The copper pot is rumbling, a low, deep vibration that travels up through the soles of my leather boots. Inside that dark belly, the alcohol is boiling, vaporizing, and rising up through the capital the bulbous head of the still before being forced into the swan neck, the graceful copper pipe that arches over my head. I tweak the valve, reducing the steam pressure by a fraction. The rumble settles into a steady hum. If I drive it too hard, the mash will scorch against the copper walls, and the entire batch will taste of burnt vegetation. If I drive it too slow, the boss, Monsieur D'Abreuil, will pace the catwalk above us, checking his pocket watch and calculating his lost francs. I step toward the testing spout, a small brass tap located near the condenser coil. It is time to check the run. I take a clear glass flagon and place it under the spout. I turn the tap. A thin, crystalline stream of liquid flows out. It looks like water, clear and innocent, but as it hits the glass, it releases a vapor that makes my eyes water. This is the heart of the distillation. The toxic heads, laden with methanol that can blind a man or drive him mad, were discarded 2 hours ago. We are now collecting the potable spirit, the perfume of the earth. I lift the flagon to the light. It is perfectly colorless. The famous green hue of absinthe does not come from the still. It comes later, from a second maceration. Right now, purity is the only goal. I dip a hydrometer into the flagon. The weighted glass bulb bobs in the liquid. I lean in, squinting through the steam to read the scale. 72 degrees. Perfect. It is strong, oily, and rich. I rub a drop of the distillate between my thumb and forefinger. It feels slick, almost greasy. This is the essential oil of the anise. When the bourgeois drinkers in the cafés of Montmartre add water to this later, these oils will snap out of solution, turning the drink into the milky, opalescent cloud they call the louche. But here, in the heat of the factory, it is just hot, clear fire. My shoulders ache. The physical sensation of the work is a constant tension between the need for brute strength and delicate precision. Earlier, I hauled 50-kilogram burlap sacks of dried wormwood up the ladder to the loading platform. My lungs still burn from the dust of the dried herbs, a bitter powder that settles into the pores of the skin and never truly washes out. I am bitter. I taste bitter. My skin tastes of wormwood. I wipe my forehead with a handkerchief that is already soaked. To my left, Henry is struggling with the discharge lever of his still. He is an older man, his face a map of broken capillaries, a common geography for men in our trade. The lever is jammed. I step over to help him. The floor is slick with water and starch residue. We grasp the iron lever together. The metal is warm. On 3, I say. 1, 2, 3. We heave. The lever gives way with a metallic groan, and the sluice gate opens, dumping the spent, boiled sog of herbs, the vinasses, into the drainage trough below. A cloud of wet, vegetal steam billows up, smelling of cooked fennel and wet dog. It is a nauseating smell, the smell of death after the spirit has been extracted. Henry nods his thanks, too winded to speak. We are all preserving our breath. The factory whistle blows. It is a shrill, mechanical scream that cuts through the humidity. Midday. The machines do not stop, but we can slow the feed. The apprentices will watch the gauges while the masters eat. I wipe my hands on my apron, leaving streaks of black grease and green dust. The hunger hits me suddenly, a sharp cramp in the stomach that overrides the nausea of the alcohol fumes. We exit the distillery floor, stepping out into the courtyard. The transition is violent. The air inside was tropical, stable, and silent save for the hiss of steam. The air outside, in the cobbled courtyard of the 11th arrondissement, is chaotic. The sky is a pale, industrial gray, bleached by the smoke of 1,000 chimneys. The noise of Paris rushes in. The clatter of iron-rimmed wagon wheels on cobblestones. The shouting of street hawkers. The distant, rhythmic thud of a steam hammer from the metalworks down the street. I walk to the wash basin, a stone trough filled with cold water from a hand pump. I scrub my face and arms with a block of harsh yellow soap. The water turns gray as it rinses away the soot and the wormwood dust. The cold shock on my heated skin feels like a blessing. I retrieve my lunch pail from the shaded shelf near the woodshed. I join Henry and two of the bottlers, Jacques and Pierre, sitting on a stack of empty oak barrels in the corner of the yard. This is our furniture. We are men who make a luxury product, yet we eat on the refuse of the trade. I open my pail. The meal is simple, the fuel of the Parisian laborer. I have a half loaf of pain de campagne, the crust thick and dark, dusted with flour. Beside it lies a wedge of Cantal cheese, sweating slightly in the heat, and a small glass jar containing a roulette of pork, sealed with a layer of white fat. I draw my folding knife from my pocket. It is a laguiole, the handle made of horn, the blade thin and sharp. I wipe the blade on my trousers before slicing into the bread. The crust crunches, resisting the steel before giving way to the soft, sour crumb inside. I spread the pork, roulette thick, on the bread. The grease will give me energy for the afternoon lift. We eat in a rhythm, the silence broken only by the chewing and the uncorking of wine bottles. We drink Pinard, the cheap, dark red wine that stains the teeth purple. It is thin and acidic, but it cuts the dust in the throat. I mix mine with a little water from the pump. Pure wine at midday makes the hand unsteady, and an unsteady hand at the steam valve can cause an explosion. Jacques the bottler is the first to speak. He wipes a crumb from his mustache. He is young, full of the fire of the trade unions. Did you hear about the glassworks in Saint-Denis? He asks. They walked out this morning. 300 men. They want an extra 10 centimes an hour. Henry grunts, slicing a piece of cheese with surgical precision. They will get the erratic cavalry, not 10 centimes. The Republic protects the owners, not the hands. I chew my bread slowly. The pork is salty and rich, coating my tongue. I look at my hands. The fingernails are stained green. No matter how much I scrub, the chlorophyll of the petite wormwood, the herb used for coloration, stays. It marks us. When I pay for tobacco at the shop on Sunday, the clerk knows what I do. I am a green hand. I swallow and take a draught of the watered wine. It is not about the money, I say, my voice raspy. It is the hours. 12 hours in that steam. My eyes burn until I cannot see the gas lamps on the walk home. Pierre nods. He is unwrapping a hard-boiled egg, tapping the shell against the wood of the barrel. It is the sulfur and the thujone. They say the vapors make you see things if you breathe them too long. We all laugh, but it is a dry, humorless sound. We have all felt the dizziness. We have all had moments where the copper pipes seemed to twist like snakes in the periphery of our vision. We tell ourselves it is just the heat. A heavy wagon rumbles into the courtyard, pulled by 2 massive Percheron horses. The driver pulls on the reins, and the horses snort, shaking their manes. The wagon is piled high with crates of glass bottles, green glass from the factories in the north. The sound of the glass clinking together is musical, like a wind chime made of ice. That is our afternoon, Henry says, gesturing with his knife, unloading the glass. I finish my bread and cheese, brushing the crumbs from my lap. The food sits heavy in my stomach, a warm weight that battles the fatigue. I take a final swig of wine, swishing it around my mouth to clear the taste of the pork fat. I lean back against the brick wall of the factory. The bricks are warm from the sun. I close my eyes for a moment. The sounds of the city wash over me. A barrel organ is playing somewhere a few streets away. A tinny, repetitive melody. A woman is shouting at her child in a window above the courtyard. The smell of the city is distinct here. Horse manure, coal smoke, roasting coffee, and the ever-present undercurrent of the open sewers. But overlaying it all, drifting out from the factory doors, is the smell of anise. It is sweet, medicinal, and overpowering. It smells like money. I open my eyes. A cat, skinny and ragged, slinks along the top of the wall, eyeing our leftovers. I toss a piece of cheese rind toward it. The cat vanishes with the prize. The whistle blows again. 1 o'clock. The sound triggers a physical reaction. My muscles tighten. The brief respite is over. We stand up, groaning as knees pop and backs straighten. We fold our knives, close our pails, and move back toward the dark maw of the distillery doors. Stepping back inside, is like walking into an oven. The heat hits me instantly, drying the sweat that had cooled on my skin during lunch. The noise of the alembics is louder now, or perhaps my ears had just adjusted to the quiet of the yard. The afternoon task changes. The distillation run on my still is nearing its end. The spirit flowing from the tap is no longer the high-proof heart. It is beginning to smell wet and cardboard-like. These are the tales, the weak alcohol that must be collected and redistilled later. I turn the valves, diverting the flow into a different tank. Now comes the most delicate part of the day, the coloration. I move to the maceration tanks at the rear of the hall. These are smaller copper vessels, heated by a water bath to ensure the temperature never exceeds 60 degrees. If it gets too hot, the chlorophyll will cook, and the absinthe will turn a murky brown instead of a brilliant emerald. I lift the lid of the coloration tank. The fumes are intense. Inside, high-proof spirit is steeping with hyssop and melissa lemon balm. I pick up a large wooden paddle, the handle polished smooth by years of grip. I lower it into the tank. The liquid is a deep, dark forest green. It looks almost black in the dim light. I begin to stir. The resistance of the liquid is heavy. I must keep the herbs moving so they do not settle and scorch on the heating coils. My arms burn. The motion is repetitive. Push, pull, swirl. Push, pull, swirl. As I stir, I watch the thermometer. 55 degrees. Good. Monsieur Dubruel walks past. He is wearing a clean frock coat and a silk tie. He stops and peers into the tank. Careful with the heat, he says, his voice cutting through the din. The last batch was olive. The Americans want emerald. I nod without looking up. Yes, monsieur. He walks on. He does not know the feel of the paddle. He does not know that the liquid changes texture when it is ready. It becomes silky. I continue to stir. The sweat runs into my eyes, stinging them. I blink it away. My world narrows down to the copper rim of the tank and the swirling green vortex inside. The smell of the lemon balm rises, cutting through the heavy anise. It is a fresh, citrusy scent, a reminder of the gardens I never see. I check the time on the wall clock. It is 2 in the afternoon. 4 hours left. I leave the coloration tank to the apprentice, Jean, and move to the filtration station. We must filter the colored spirit before it is barreled. This is wet, messy work. I arrange the wool felt filters inside the copper funnels. I begin to pour the green spirit from a bucket. The liquid splashes, and a few drops land on my forearm. It burns cold, the alcohol evaporating instantly, leaving a sticky green residue. I wipe it on my apron. My hands are now completely stained. I pause to lift a heavy carboy of water. The The muscles in my lower back seize tight, a sharp, hot line of pain. I exhale a sharp breath through my teeth. I set the carboy down and stretch, twisting my torso. The pain is a familiar companion. It is the price of the trade. I look down the line of stills. The steam creates a haze, blurring the far end of the room. Through the mist, I see the silhouettes of the other men, moving in the same rhythm, bowing to the copper idols. We are the alchemists of the working class. We take the weeds of the field, the wormwood, the hyssop, the fennel, and through heat and sweat, we turn them into the dream of Paris. I pick up the bucket again. The liquid sloshes, a green wave. I pour. The filter drinks it in. The air hums with the energy of the boilers. Outside, the city moves on, oblivious to the heat and the labor that fuels its vices. But in here, time is measured in drops, in degrees of temperature, and in the aching of muscles. I am thirsty, not for the wine, and certainly not for the absinthe. I crave cold, clean water, but that must wait. The vat is not empty. The fire is still burning. I wipe my brow with my sleeve, grip the handle of the bucket, and pour again. The scent of anise fills my lungs, becoming the only air I know. The steam whistle from the nearby locomotive works screams across the rooftops of Panton, signaling the end of the lunch hour. But inside the distillery, the rhythm is dictated not by whistles, but by the slow, bubbling temperament of copper and fire. I step back onto the factory floor, the heavy wooden doors thudding shut behind me, sealing out the relatively fresh air of the courtyard. The heat hits me instantly. It is a physical weight, a wall of humid botanical warmth that presses against the chest and instantly slicks the skin with a fresh layer of perspiration. The morning was for preparation and the initial boil, but the afternoon is the long, arduous wait, the monitoring, and the heavy lifting. The sun has moved to the western side of the building, piercing through the grime-streaked high windows in slanted beams that illuminate the millions of dust motes dancing in the air. These are not just dust. They are particles of dried wormwood, fennel pollen, and crushed anise seeds. The very air here is an ingredient. I walk to the row of alembics, the great copper pot stills that stand like pot-bellied soldiers in a line. My boots, heavy leather fortified with hobnails, click dully against the wet stone floor. The humidity is rising. As the distillation reaches its peak, the connections between the swan neck and the cooling coil hiss softly. I run a rag over my face, wiping away the sweat that stings my eyes. My hands are already stained a faint yellow-green, the indelible mark of the trade. The task at hand is the most delicate operation of the day, the coloration. To the layman, absinthe is simply green liquor. To me, the green is a living thing, a volatile capture of chlorophyll that can turn brown and dead if the temperature spikes by even 2 degrees. I move to the smaller heating tank, the coloration vessel. We have already drawn off the clear distillate, the blanche, from the main run. It sits in a holding vat, pungent and high proof, roughly 75% alcohol. It smells of raw heat and intense anise. Now I must transform it. I beckon to Lucian, the apprentice. He is a boy of 19, with forearms already thickening from lifting sackcloth bales. But he lacks the nose. He is dragging a burlap sack across the floor, the sound like sandpaper on bone. Bring the hyssop and the petite wormwood, I say, my voice raspy from the fumes. And the melissa, gently. He heaves the sack up onto the workbench. I untie the twine. The smell of the dried herbs is dusty and sharp, cutting through the cloying sweetness of the anise vapor filling the room. This is the Roman wormwood, Artemisia pontica, different from the grand wormwood we macerated this morning. This one brings the color, not the bitterness. I take a handful of the dried hyssop. It is brittle. I crush a blossom between my thumb and forefinger, releasing a scent of camphor and mint. This is the art. If I add too much, the spirit becomes medicinal, like a throat lozenge. If I add too little, the color is pale, anemic, and the customer will think we have watered it down. I open the hatch of the coloration tank, where a portion of the clear distillate is waiting. The heat rising from the open hatch is enough to make me recoil. It is 130 degrees in that tank. I nod to Lucian, and we begin to feed the herbs into the hot alcohol. The dried leaves hit the liquid and swirl, instantly darkening as they hydrate. Close it, I order. We crank the heavy iron wheel to seal the hatch. Now we wait. This is the drag. The afternoon stretches out, measured not in minutes, but in the slow extraction of pigment. I move back to the main stills. The third still is nearing the end of its run. This requires focus. I cannot rely on a clock. I must rely on the hydrometer and my own palate. I turn the brass tap at the bottom of the condenser, letting a thin stream of liquid splash into a glass testing jar. I float the glass alcoholometer into the liquid. It bobs, settling deep. 55 degrees. We are hitting the tails. The tails are the end of the distillation run, where the alcohol content drops and the heavier, oily fusel oils begin to come over. These oils smell like wet cardboard and dirty socks. If they get into the final barrel, the entire batch is ruined. This is the hardest part of the afternoon shift, fighting the fatigue to maintain vigilance. My legs ache from standing on the stone. The arches of my feet feel flattened. My lower back has a dull, throbbing pulse that synchronizes with the rhythmic chug-chug-chug of the steam pipes. I dip my finger into the stream coming from the tap and touch it to my tongue. It is still sweet, still clean, but there is a shadow of coarseness at the back of the throat. Not yet, I mutter to myself. I watch the stream. It is mesmerizing. The clear liquid twists like a glass rope. The heat in the room seems to intensify as the afternoon sun beats against the brickwork outside. The ventilation is poor. The air is thick with ethanol. It makes the head swim. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from inhaling alcohol vapor for 8 hours. It is not drunkenness. It is a heavy, lethargic numbness. Your movements slow down. Your thoughts feel like they are wading through treacle. I look down the line. Henry, the other distiller, is leaning against a pillar, his eyes closed for a second. He jolts awake as a wrench slips from his hand and clatters to the floor. We exchange a look. No words are needed. We are both waiting for the whistle. I check the hydrometer again. 50 degrees. The smell is changing. The bright anise is fading, replaced by a dull vegetable odor. Cut it, I shout to Lucian. The boy scrambles to the diverter valve. He struggles with the wheel. It is hot and stiff with old grease, but he manages to turn it. The stream is diverted away from the main collection tank and into the faints receiver to be recycled for the next batch. We have saved the heart. Now comes the physical labor. The heat source must be killed for the coloration tank. The maceration is done. The liquid inside is no longer clear. It is a deep, dark emerald, almost black in its concentration. We must filter it. Lucian and I position. The wool filters over the mixing vat. The pump engages with a mechanical cough, a rhythmic thump-thump that vibrates through the soles of my boots. A thick green stream erupts from the pipe, splashing into the vat where it mixes with the clear distillate we set aside earlier. This is the moment of alchemy. The dark, concentrated herbal extract hits the clear spirit, and the color blooms. It swirls and expands, turning the entire volume into the luminous, jewel-toned peridot green that Paris craves. The smell changes again, becoming complex, floral, and grassy. It smells like a meadow after rain, preserved in fire. I take a sampling glass and dip it into the vat. I hold it up to the light of the window. The sun is lower now, more orange, and it shines through the liquid. It is perfect, clear, bright, with no sediment. I swirl it. The legs, the oily residue clinging to the glass, are thick, but the satisfaction is fleeting. The body reminds me that I have been standing for 7 hours. I wipe my hands on my apron, the coarse fabric scratching my skin. My knuckles are raw from the lye we used to scrub the equipment. 3:30 in the afternoon. The lull. The stills are cooling. The pumps are silent. Now comes the cleaning. This is the part of the job that breaks the spirit. The romance of the green fairy evaporates when you are on your knees, scrubbing caramelized sugar and burnt botanical matter from the bottom of a copper pot. I grab a stiff-bristled brush and a bucket of hot water mixed with caustic soda. The fumes from the soda mix with the alcohol vapor, creating a stinging haze. I climb the small ladder to the hatch of the first still, which has been empty and cooling for an hour. It is still warm to the touch. I lean inside. The smell is pungent, boiled vegetation. It smells like rotting spinach. I scrub. My shoulder burns with the repetitive motion. Scrub, rinse, scrub. The copper must shine. Any residue left behind will scorch during tomorrow's run and taint the flavor. I am meticulous, not out of pride, but out of fear of the master distiller's inspection. He has eyes like a hawk and a temper to match. Below me, Lucian is sweeping the floor. The sound of the broom bristles on the wet stone is hypnotic. Swish, swish. The dust rises and settles again. My mind wanders. I think of the cafe on the Boulevard de Magenta. I think of the sensation of sitting down, of the wood of the chair against my back. I think of a cold beer, not absinthe. Never absinthe after work. You cannot drink what you breathe all day. You need something bitter and cold to cut the sweetness from your throat. I climb down from the ladder, my knees popping. I stretch, feeling the vertebrae in my spine click. I am covered in grime. My shirt is stuck to my back. The light in the factory has shifted to the blue hour, that time of late afternoon when the interior shadows lengthen and the windows become squares of cobalt blue twilight. The gas lamps have not yet been lit, so we work in the dimness. It is harder to see the dirt, harder to read the gauges. I move to the inventory desk, a high, slanted table covered in ledgers. I have to log the day's yield. My hand shakes slightly as I dip the pen into the inkwell. It is a tremor of fatigue, the muscles twitching after hours of tension. Batch 409, 400 liters. Proof 68. Coloration standard. The numbers blur on the page. I pinch the bridge of my nose, squeezing my eyes shut to reset my vision. The silence in the factory is heavy now. The roar of the fires is gone, replaced by the ticking of cooling metal. The copper contracts as it cools, making sharp pinging sounds that echo in the rafters. Hey, old man. I look up. It is Henry. He is wiping his neck with a towel. He looks as tired as I feel. His face is gray in the dim light, his mustache drooping. Lucian dropped a crate of bottles in the packing room, he says. I sigh. It is a long, ragged exhale. Of course he did. Is there glass everywhere? I ask. Everywhere. And it smells like anise extract, the concentrated stuff. I put down the pen. This is the final insult of the shift, the unexpected disaster when you are closest to the door. I walk with Henry to the packing room. The smell hits us before we enter, a wall of scent so strong it tastes bitter. Lucian is standing there, broom in hand, looking terrified. A puddle of dark green oil is spreading across the floor, glittering with shards of glass. I do not shout. I do not have the energy to shout. I simply look at the mess, then at the boy. Sawdust, I say. Get the sawdust. We spend the next 20 minutes shoveling sawdust onto the spill. The oil soaks into the wood chips, turning them black. We sweep it up. The glass crunches. We have to be careful. A cut in this environment, with all the bacteria from the raw herbs and the chemical irritation of the alcohol, can turn nasty quickly. My hands are sticky. The oil has seeped through the sawdust and onto my fingers. The smell is impossible to remove. I will smell like this on the omnibus ride home. The other passengers will wrinkle their noses. Some will look at me with envy, thinking I have been drinking. Others with disgust, thinking I am a drunkard. They do not know it is the smell of labor, not leisure. 5:30. We haul the sacks of oil-soaked sawdust to the incinerator chute. The physical exertion of the shoveling has woken me up slightly. A second wind born of irritation. The foreman walks onto the floor. He checks the pressure gauges, taps the side of a barrel, runs a finger along the copper I scrubbed. He looks at his finger. It is clean. He grunts. Lock the valves, he says. I go to the main steam line. The wheel is large, iron, and cold. I grip it with both hands and turn it clockwise. It resists, then gives. I spin it until it locks tight. The lifeblood of the factory is cut off. The beast sleeps. I walk to the cloakroom. It is a narrow, wooden hallway filled with hooks. I unbutton my heavy leather apron. It is stiff with dried spills and wax. I hang it up. The weight leaving my shoulders is a physical relief so profound I almost stumble. I peel off my work jacket. Underneath, my shirt is stained with sweat and soot. I put on my street coat, a rough wool jacket that has seen better days, but it is clean. I wash my hands in the stone basin. The water is cold. I use a block of pumice soap, scrubbing until my skin is red, trying to get the green stain out of my cuticles. It never fully comes out. My hands are a map of my profession. I step out of the factory door. The transition is jarring. The air outside is cool, carrying the scent of coal smoke, horse manure, and roasting chestnuts from a street vendor. It is the smell of Paris. The noise of the street rushes in the clatter of carriage wheels on cobblestones. The shout of a newsboy selling Le Petit Journal. The distant hum of the city. The sky is a bruised purple, the sun having just dipped below the horizon. The gas lamps along the street are flickering to life, casting pools of yellow light on the pavement. I stand for a moment on the step, adjusting my cap. My legs feel hollow. My stomach rumbles, reminding me I haven't eaten since noon. Henry steps out beside me. He lights a cigarette, the flare of the match illuminating his tired eyes. He inhales deeply, then offers the pack to me. I take one. The tobacco smoke is harsh and grounding. It tastes of reality, pushing back the ethereal, herbal memory of the distillery. Until tomorrow, he says. Until tomorrow, I reply. I begin the walk to the omnibus stop. I pass a cafe with large glass windows. Inside, the tables are filling up. Men in top hats and women with feathers in their hair are sitting at the marble tables. On almost every table, there are glasses, spoons resting on rims, sugar cubes, fountains dripping water. I see a waiter carrying a tray with a bottle of the very brand I bottled 3 days ago. He pours a measure into a glass. The customer watches, entranced, as the water hits the spirit and the cloud, the louche forms. They smile. They are buying the dream. They are buying the mystique, the poetry, the madness. I stop and watch them for a second through the glass. My back aches. My hands smell of fennel. I know exactly what temperature that liquid was distilled at. I know the boy who swept the floor where the wormwood was stored. I know the chemical reason the water turns it milky. There is no magic in the glass for me, only the memory of the heat, the copper, and the long, slow drag of the afternoon. I turn away from the window and head towards the station. The omnibus is coming. I can hear the horse's hooves. I just want to sit down. I just want to close my eyes. I just want to go home. The copper neck of the alembic is cool to the touch now. For 12 hours, this metal beast has radiated a heat that warps the air and slicks the skin with sweat. But as the fires die down in the furnace beneath, the copper returns to a sullen, dull temperature. I run a rag over the rivets, wiping away a smear of botanical oil that has seeped from the flange. The distillation is finished for the day. The clear, potent spirit has been collected. The coloring stage with the hyssop and melissa is settling in the vats, and the heavy, earthy scent of wet wormwood hangs in the factory like a physical weight. My shoulders ache with a dull, throbbing rhythm that matches the fading pulse of the machinery. I wipe my hands on my apron, looking down at my fingers. The stains are permanent. No amount of lye soap removes the greenish-yellow tint of the grand wormwood, or the darker, resinous, sticky patches of the anise. My hands look like they belong to a painter who works only in the colors of envy and decay. I move to the logbook on the standing desk near the door. The nib of my pen scratches against the paper as I record the final yield. 85 liters of high-proof spirit, ready for the coloring maceration. The ink takes a moment to dry in the humid air of the distillery. I blow on it, my breath disturbing the dust motes dancing in the last shaft of sunlight, cutting through the high, grime-streaked windows. The silence of the factory is heavy. During the day, the roar of the steam pipes and the bubbling of the boilers creates a wall of sound that isolates a man in his own head. Now, in the quiet, I hear the cooling metal ticking. It creates a sound like settling bones. I check the valves one last time. The pressure gauges have all returned to zero. The safety releases are open. The firebox is banked. The coals covered in ash to sleep until morning. I untie my leather apron, hanging it on a peg by the door. It is stiff with dried botanical splatter. I shrug into my wool jacket, which feels tight across the shoulders. It smells of the street, coal smoke, and damp wool. A stark contrast to the sharp, medicinal perfume of the factory. I take my cap from the hook and pull it low. Stepping out of the heavy wooden doors, the evening air hits me like a wet towel. It is October in Paris, and the dampness rises from the Seine, clinging to the cobblestones and turning the air into a gray mist. I lock the iron bar across the factory doors, the heavy key turning with a grinding resistance that vibrates up my arm. The street outside the distillery is paved with rough, uneven stones that punish tired feet. This is the industrial fringe, away from the grand boulevards of barren Haussmann. Here, the buildings are brick and soot-stained plaster, looming over narrow alleys where the gutters run dark with the runoff of tanneries and dye works. I begin the walk toward the center of the city, toward the path that leads home. The shift has ended, but the city is just waking up for its second life. As I walk, the rhythm of my boots on the stones becomes a hypnotic cadence. 1, 2, 1, 2. My legs feel heavy, the muscles in my calves tight from standing on the concrete floor all day. I pass a gas lamp just as the illumor arrives with his long pole. He pushes the tip into the glass housing, and with a soft pop that I feel in my chest, the blue flame flares into a yellow halo. The light reflects off the damp pavement, creating pools of gold amidst the gray. The smell of the city changes as I move away from the industrial quarter. The chemical tang of the factories gives way to the smell of horse manure, roasting chestnuts, and unwashed bodies. It is the smell of the populace. I reach the intersection of a wider boulevard. Here, the world is different. The electric trams are beginning to replace the horse-drawn omnibuses, their metal wheels screeching against the rails with a piercing cry that cuts through the low murmur of the crowd. I wait for a carriage to pass, the horses blowing steam from their nostrils, their hooves clattering loudly. The carriage is lacquered black, gleaming under the gaslights, carrying someone with soft hands and clean cuffs to a dinner I can only imagine. I walk past the cafés. It is the green hour, El Huravert. This is the time of day I work for, yet I am rarely part of it. Through the large plate glass windows, I see them. The poets, the laborers, the bourgeoisie, all sitting at the small, round marble tables. I stop for a moment, feigning an adjustment to my boot, just to watch. I see a waiter in a pristine white apron approaching a table. He carries a carafe of water and a bottle of the very spirit I spent my day coaxing from the copper. I watch him pour the dose into the heavy glass. He places the perforated spoon across the rim, and upon the spoon, a sugar cube. I know the chemistry of what happens next better than I know my own face. I watch as the customer tips the water carafe. The water drips. 1 drop. 2. It hits the sugar, dissolving it, and falls into the emerald liquid below. I watch for the louche, the moment the hydrophobic essential oils of the anise, unable to stay dissolved in the weakening alcohol, rush out of solution. The liquid turns from clear green to a milky, opalescent white. It is a violent chemical reaction, disguised as a parlor trick. The customer lifts the glass. I can almost taste it, the numbing shock of the anise, the bitter undertone of the wormwood, the heat of the alcohol. But I do not go in. My clothes are stained with the raw ingredients. I smell too strongly of the factory. To drink absinthe while smelling like a vat of macerating hyssop would be overwhelming. I am the maker, not the consumer, at least not tonight. I turn my collar up against the wind and continue walking. The hunger begins to gnaw at my stomach now. It is a sharp, insistent pain. I passed a bakery earlier, but the smell of fresh bread was masked by the exhaust of a passing coal wagon. Now the scent of roasting meat from a vendor's stall makes my mouth water. But I have food at home, and the coins in my pocket must last until the end of the week. My apartment is in the 18th arrondissement, a climb up the hill of Montmartre. The streets become steeper, the buildings leaning in toward each other as if gossiping. The gas lamps are fewer here, the shadows longer. I navigate the familiar cracks in the pavement by memory. I reach my building, a tall, narrow structure with peeling paint and a heavy wooden door that is never quite closed. The hallway smells of boiled cabbage and damp plaster. I begin the climb. First floor, second floor. The staircase is narrow, the wooden steps worn into shallow valleys in the center by decades of footsteps. My hand glides over the polished wood of the banister, feeling the grain. On the third floor, I hear the sound of an argument through a thin door. A man shouting, a woman pleading, then the crash of something ceramic shattering. I do not pause. These are the sounds of the building, as constant as the wind. I reach the 5th floor, my breath coming shorter now. I take the iron key from my pocket. It is cold and heavy. I slide it into the lock, jiggling it slightly to catch the tumblers. A trick I learned 3 years ago and perform without thinking. The door swings open. The room is dark and cold. I step inside and close the door, locking the world out. The silence here is different from the factory. It is a hollow, personal silence. I strike a match against the wall, the sulfur flaring briefly before I touch it to the wick of the oil lamp on the table. The flame catches, growing tall and steady, casting a warm, orange circle of light that pushes back the shadows in the corners. The apartment is small, a single room that serves as kitchen, parlor, and bedroom. A cast iron stove sits in one corner, a small table in the center, and my bed pushed against the far wall. The air inside is stale, holding the chill of the unheated day. I move to the stove. The coal scuttle is half full. I take the iron poker and stir the gray ash from the morning, finding a few embers that still hold a dull red glow deep in the center. I add a handful of kindling and a few lumps of coal. I blow gently on the embers. The ash flies up, dusting my face, but the wood catches. The fire begins to crackle, a comforting domestic sound. I wash my hands in the enamel basin on the washstand. The water in the pitcher is freezing. I pour it over my hands, scrubbing with a harsh block of soap. The water turns gray, then slightly green as the botanical oils lift from my skin. I splash the cold water on my face, gasping at the shock. It washes away the fatigue of the commute, leaving me awake but weary. Dinner is simple. I take a loaf of bread from the bread box. It is 2 days old, the crust hard enough to bruise the gums, but the inside is still yielding. I take a knife and slice a wedge of hard cheese, the rind stamped with the mark of the maker. On the stove, I place a small pot containing the remains of a vegetable soup from yesterday. While the soup warms, I pour myself a glass of wine. It is not fine wine. It is Pinard, the cheap, dark red ration of the worker. It tastes of tannins and iron, rough against the tongue, but it warms the blood. I sit at the small table, the chair creaking under my weight. I eat slowly. I dip the hard bread into the hot soup, watching the broth soak into the crumb, softening it. The soup tastes of onions, carrots, and the salt of a ham bone. It is not refined, but it is sustenance. I chew methodically, staring at the flame of the lamp. My mind replays the day. The temperature of the second, still, was running high around noon. I will need to check the gasket on the steam inlet tomorrow. If it fails, the pressure could rupture the copper. The thought creates a knot of anxiety in my chest, but I wash it down with the wine. After the meal, I wipe the bowl with the last of the bread and eat it. I do not leave a crumb. There is a stack of newspapers on the floor. I pick up a copy of Le Petit Journal that I found on a bench yesterday. The news is already old, but it is new to me. I unfold the large, broadsheet pages. The paper is coarse, the ink prone to smudging. I read about the debates in the Chamber of Deputies, the arguments over tariffs and colonial expansions. It feels distant, a play performed by actors on a stage I will never see. I turn to the fates, divers, the local crimes and accidents. A tram derailment in the Latin Quarter, a double murder in a back alley near Les Halles. These stories feel real. They are the texture of the city I live in. I read the descriptions of the scenes, the gaslight illuminating the cobblestones, and I nod. I know that light. I know those stones. My eyes begin to burn. The light from the lamp is insufficient for long reading, and the fatigue is returning, heavier now. I fold the paper and place it back on the stack. I take my pipe from the mantelpiece. It is a briar pipe, the bowl blackened by years of use. I pack it with tobacco, a dark shag cut that smells of molasses and dried figs. I light it with a spill from the stove. The smoke curls around my head, a blue-gray wreath. I sit back in the chair, stretching my legs toward the stove. This is the only true leisure of the day. The 30 minutes between the meal and the bed. I listen to the building settling for the night. Above me, footsteps pace back and forth. A child cries and is hushed. Outside, the wind rattles the window pane in its loose frame. I look at my hands again, resting on the fabric of my trousers. The green stain is visible, even in the dim light. I am branded by my trade. I wonder if the people drinking the absinthe tonight, laughing in the electric light of the boulevards, ever think of the hands that made it. Likely not. To them, it is magic in a bottle. To me, it is boiling points, specific gravities, and the relentless hauling of sacks of dry herbs. The pipe goes out. I knock the ash into the stove. The fire is dying down, the heat receding. It is time. I stand up and move to the bed. I strip off my clothes layer by layer. The wool jacket, the vest, the shirt stiff with sweat. The air in the room attacks my bare skin, raising goose flesh. I hurry to put on my nightshirt, a long flannel garment that has been warming near the stove. I wind the clock on the mantelpiece. The mechanical grinding of the spring is the signal that the day is officially over. I check the time. 9:30. I must be up at 5. 7.5 hours. It is enough, but barely. I blow out the lamp. The room plunges into darkness, save for the faint red glow from the grate of the stove. The smell of the extinguished wick, acrid smoke, hangs in the air for a moment before dissipating. I climb into bed. The mattress is stuffed with wool, lumpy and compressed in the center. The The sheets are cold, feeling damp against my legs. I pull the heavy wool blankets up to my chin, curling my body into a tight ball to conserve heat. I shiver, my teeth chattering once, twice, before the warmth of my own body begins to create a microclimate beneath the covers. I lie on my back, staring up at the invisible ceiling. I close my eyes. The sensory input of the day begins to fade, replaced by the phantoms of the mind. I smell the anise again, sharp and cloying. I see the green liquid swirling in the glass. I feel the heat of the furnace on my face. My body relaxes, sinking into the mattress. The ache in my shoulders dulls to a background hum. The sounds of the city outside are muffled now, distant and rhythmic. The clip-clop of a late carriage, the whistle of a train from the Gare du Nord, a lonely, mournful sound that travels for miles in the night air. My breathing slows. The thoughts of gaskets and temperatures dissolve. The distinction between the distiller and the man fades. There is only the darkness, the warmth of the blanket, and the heavy, irresistible pull of sleep. The darkness swirls, not green like the liquor, but black and velvet soft. I drift. The floorboards creak one last time, but I do not hear them. I am gone. The day is done.